Welcome back to Tarik Talk. Let's get into today's episode. 154 Contemporary African Art Fair returns to New York City from May 13th through May 17th, 2026. Once again, bringing together galleries, artists, collectors, curators, and institutions from across Africa and the global diaspora for one of the most important art fairs dedicated to contemporary African art in the world. Now, for people unfamiliar with the name, the title 154 actually carries a deeper meaning. The 1 represents one continent. The 54 represents the 54 countries that make up Africa. And from the very beginning, the fair was created to challenge the way African contemporary art has historically been represented within the global art market. Founded by Touria El Glaoui in London back in 2013, 154 quickly became far more than simply an art fair. It became a platform for visibility, dialogue, education, and cultural exchange centered around artists from Africa and the African diaspora. And over the past decade, the fair has played a major role in helping reshape global conversations around contemporary African art. Today, artists from across the continent are increasingly being included in major museum exhibitions, biennials, institutional collections, and international art fairs, and 154 has absolutely been part of that shift. The New York edition has become especially important because of the city's role as one of the central hubs of the international art world. Each year during Frieze Week, 154 brings together an incredible range of voices, perspectives, and practices inside a much more intimate and focused environment compared to some of the larger mega fairs happening simultaneously across the city. For the 2026 edition, the fair features approximately 30 galleries representing artists from more than 17 countries across Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and North America, 154com. That international mix has always been one of the defining characteristics of the fair. You have galleries based directly in cities like Lagos, Accra, Johannesburg, Marrakech, Cairo, Nairobi, and Dakar exhibiting alongside galleries from Paris, London, New York, Dubai, and Brussels. And that global structure reflects the reality of contemporary African art today. The artists themselves are often working across multiple geographies. Many move between continents. Some are based within Africa, while others are part of a broader diaspora network stretching across Europe and the United States. The fair embraces that complexity rather than trying to define African contemporary art as a single style or identity, and honestly, that's one of the most important things about 154. The fair consistently pushes against oversimplified narratives. There is no single African contemporary art aesthetic. Instead, visitors encounter an enormous diversity of practices, materials, histories, and perspectives. Painting, sculpture, photography, textile-based works, performance, installation, moving image, conceptual practices, and mixed media projects all coexist throughout the fair. And many of the artists represented are engaging with themes that resonate globally while remaining deeply connected to specific local histories and experiences. Another major highlight this year is the continued expansion of the fair's special projects and talks program. 154 has become known not only for its gallery presentations, but also for its conversations, panels, educational initiatives, and collaborations with museums and nonprofits throughout New York City. 154com. The 2026 edition includes artist talks, curator conversations, collector forums, and discussions surrounding issues like migration, identity, sustainability, archival practices, and the evolving role of African institutions within the global art ecosystem. And honestly, those conversations are incredibly important because contemporary African art is still too often framed through limited or outdated perspectives within mainstream Western art history. 154 creates space for artists and curators to define those narratives themselves. That shift matters. The fair also continues its partnerships with educational institutions and residency organizations throughout New York, helping create opportunities for artists beyond the commercial side of the fair itself. 154com. And that balance between market visibility and long-term cultural infrastructure is part of why 154 has become so respected internationally. This year's edition also includes several highly anticipated solo presentations from emerging galleries and younger artists, gaining increasing international attention. Many collectors specifically attend 154 to discover artists before they become more widely visible in the broader market. And historically, the fair has been incredibly influential in launching artists into museum exhibitions exhibitions, biennials, and institutional collections worldwide. Several artists who previously exhibited at 154 have since gone on to appear in Venice Biennale exhibitions, major museum retrospectives, and prominent international collections. That track record has strengthened the fair's influence significantly over the past decade. Another exciting aspect of 154 New York 2026 is the fair's emphasis on interdisciplinary collaborations. Fashion, design, architecture, music, and film increasingly intersect throughout the programming. And that crossover feels very natural because many contemporary African artists already work fluidly across disciplines. Several special activations this year reportedly include collaborations between artists and designers, along with pop-up installations and site-specific projects happening throughout Manhattan during the week. culturedmag.com. And during Frieze Week, New York itself becomes part of the experience. Collectors move between fairs all day. Gallery openings happen non-stop across Chelsea and the Lower East Side. Museums launch major exhibitions, artists host dinners and performances. Fashion brands organize activations. Curators move from studio visits to after-parties late into the night. And within that larger ecosystem, 154 occupies a unique position. The fair feels more intimate, more focused, more conversation-driven. Visitors often spend significant time engaging directly with galleries and learning about the artist's practices in depth. That atmosphere creates a very different experience compared to some of the larger commercial fairs where people move quickly through hundreds of booths. At 154, there's space for dialogue. And because of that, the fair often feels deeply personal. Another important element of this year's edition is the growing presence of galleries from North and West Africa. Over the past several years, cities like Lagos, Accra, Marrakech, and Cairo have emerged as increasingly influential centers for contemporary art production and collecting. Artnews.com. New institutions, residency programs, independent spaces, and collector networks continue developing throughout the continent, and the global art market is paying closer attention than ever before. At the same time, many artists represented at 154 continue addressing themes connected to colonial history, migration, labor, spirituality, ecology, memory, urban transformation, and identity. But importantly, the work is never reducible to those themes alone. There's also humor, abstraction, material experimentation, futurism, minimalism, performance, joy, fashion, sound, architecture. The fair presents African contemporary art as expansive and multidimensional rather than narrowly political or ethnographic. And that distinction feels incredibly important. One of the most exciting shifts happening right now is the increasing recognition of African contemporary art institutions themselves. For years, much of the global art market treated Europe and the United States as the primary centers validating artistic success. But today, institutions, biennials, museums, and collector communities throughout Africa are becoming increasingly influential in shaping international discourse directly. 154 reflects that evolution. The fair no longer simply introduces African artists to Western audiences. Instead, it operates as part of a much larger global network of institutions and conversations already happening across the continent itself. That's a huge shift. Another major talking point this year is the continued rise of younger collectors engaging with artists represented at the fair. There's growing interest from younger audiences who are actively seeking work connected to global histories, diasporic experiences, and emerging cultural movements beyond traditional Western frameworks. FinancialTimes.com. And fairs like 154 are increasingly becoming spaces where those collectors, curators, and artists connect directly. There's also a visible effort within the fair to maintain accessibility and educational engagement. Panels, walkthroughs, and programming are designed not only for experienced collectors, but also for students, younger audiences, and first-time visitors interested in learning more about contemporary African art. That openness is part of the fair's identity. And honestly, that accessibility helps create a much more welcoming atmosphere. The fair feels intellectually ambitious while still remaining approachable. And as the art world continues becoming more international, fairs like 1-54 play an increasingly important role in expanding whose stories, histories, and artistic languages are centered within global contemporary art conversations. The impact of the fair extends far beyond sales. It influences museum programming, curatorial research, academic discourse, collector awareness, institutional acquisitions, and long-term visibility for artists and galleries across the continent and diaspora. 154 Contemporary African Art Fair 2026 runs from May 13th through May 17th in New York City during one of the busiest and most internationally connected weeks in the contemporary art world. 154com. And for anyone interested in discovering artists shaping the future of global contemporary art, 154 continues to be one of the most essential and influential fairs in New York.